This is Talk of the Nation. I'm Neil Conan in Washington. You've seen it on Ally McBeal, Sex and the City, and in movies like Bridget Jones' Diary. The single woman searching for that elusive Mr. Right. The subtext of all of those plots is the old line from Surf City, 2 girls for every boy. And statistics show that for many years men did enjoy a statistical advantage. There were so many more eligible women that males of the baby boom generation could afford to be picky. But if U.S. Census numbers are to be believed, that is changing fast. Right now, there are about the same number of men in their 30s as there are eligible women, and by the year 2010, men in that age group will outnumber their likely mates by 2 to 1. That's right, 2 to 1. A couple of years ago, when the author of Bridget Jones, Helen Fielding, appeared on this program, one of our callers had noticed some of the effects of this demographic shift already.
I'm just wanting to get rid of this myth that men are so commitment averse. I'm really tired of hearing it. I can't think of how many times I've been basically dumped by women who thought that I was getting too serious, and women that basically insisted upon wanting to date like 3 or 4 other people while we were dating.
Divorce rates are down, birth rates are up, fewer women are entering the workplace, men are taking out an even higher percentage of personal ads. Have you noticed any effects of this trend? If you're dating, have you seen any changes? What are the implications of the growing shortage of younger women? What's caused this shift, and how long is it likely to last? Our telephone number is 800-989-8255. That's 800-989-TALK. Our email address, totn@npr.org. And joining us now is Sherry Cooper. She's Executive Vice President and Global Economic Strategist for Harris Bank and author of Ride the Waves, Taking Control in a Turbulent Financial Age. Part of her job is to study demographic trends and the impact those changes may have on our society. She joins us from her office in Toronto, Canada, and welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Birth statistics show that the number of male and female babies is generally just about the same. So how do we arrive at a situation where men of a marrying age outnumber available women by 2 to 1?
Well, the reason that happens is first-time bridegrooms tend to marry women their age or younger. Indeed, the average age difference between men and women is roughly 2 to 3 years, and this trend has remained constant for decades, and it's still true. It appears even to be unrelated to education or socioeconomic background. So over a period of time when birth rates fall significantly, like the time we saw from roughly 1960 until 1975, when you fast forward roughly 25 years and those babies are then in the marriage pool for first-time marrieds, and men are looking to marry women their age and younger, they're actually dipping into a pool of ever-decreasing numbers of women. It's an advantage for women in that situation because those somewhat older guys are, in fact, larger in number.
Well, historically, there have been some social implications of situations like this. What are they?
Well, it's quite huge, interestingly. In societies where there are more men than women in the first-time marriage pool, these societies generally are more small c, conservative in their family values. Men want to marry younger. They're more commitment-friendly. They want to snap up the, quote, best, most desirable, attractive women quickly. Women generally will be more likely to stay home with their children. It's a society that values virginity. It shuns promiscuity. I'm exaggerating a bit here.
Okay.
We see it very dramatically in the Muslim world, or in China, for example, where girl babies aren't as prized as male. So for that reason, once people have had their much-wanted son, they stop having children, and so indeed you end up with a marriage pool years later with more men than women.
Well, what happens in the opposite situation when
Well,
there's
the
more...
opposite situation is the one that I experienced, the baby boom generation experience.
You and me both, yeah.
Yeah, because back then we had rapidly rising birth rates for a very long period of time, from about 1940 until roughly 1960. And so then fast forward 20, 25 years when the baby boomers were in the marriage pool, given that guys often marry women 2 or 3 years younger, they were dipping into a pool of ever-increasing numbers of women. There were far more women than men. Men were postponing marriage. They were playing the field. Promiscuity increased dramatically. Women entered the labor force in record numbers because it was their only means of financial security. Divorce rates increased sharply. Promiscuity was high. Free love, singles bars. And a lot of guys who are today in their 30s kind of grew up believing it would be the same for them.
Because the older cohort wrote the movies.
Exactly. And it was part of the culture, as we've seen, even in today's literature.
Sure.
And so those guys thought, hey, they play the field in college, they finish school, they go into their jobs, and then they wake up one morning and realize, my goodness, I'm 37 years old and I still haven't found Mrs. Right. And it's very tough because actually, A, there are fewer women than men in their marriage pool, and B, baby boomer men, those older guys, late 40s, that are successful, already established in their careers, in second and third marriages, often marry women not just 2 or 3 years younger, but substantially younger still. So they're snapping up some of those very desirable 30-something-year-old women, making it tougher for the guys.
So it's a little like watching a snake, the progress of a snake's meal moving through the snake's body. I mean, this bulge doesn't change, it just changes which age group you're in.
Exactly. In other words, boomer women will never find it easy. Even as today they're in their early 50s or late 40s, they still, if they find themselves single, they're very likely, much more likely than men their age, to remain single and not by choice.
And similarly, roughly Gen X males are going to have a problem.
Exactly. Unless, of course, they become attracted to 50-something-year-old women. We'll wait and see if that happens.
Now, you mentioned that this applies in other cultures. In China, you mentioned Muslim societies?
Yes. In any society where there are more men than women in the marriage pool, for whatever reason, then, in fact, they become very conservative. And we see that in Muslim societies where men marry more than one woman, especially attractive or successful or wealthy men. Again, the woman becomes, indeed, in many ways, there's a different mindset in all of this. It's going to change again, by the way. The young men today that are in college right now, those in their and into their early 20s, there was a big increase in birth rates from about just before 1975 until roughly 1992.
The so-called baby echo.
Exactly. And this echo boom, these Gen Ys, as some people call them, well, those guys are going to experience much of what their fathers might have experienced.
I see. So it's just this middle group that's going to get squeezed.
Exactly. At least for the moment, it's just that very small population cohort that that were born from roughly 1960 until about 1975.
Well, are there financial implications in this?
There really are, interestingly enough, because, again, in a society where you get a very large percentage of women in the workforce, especially young mothers in the workforce, you have a population that has less time than money. And so as the boomer women were doing this in the 80s, we saw this dramatic surge in the demand for convenience kinds of products. As the labor force participation rate of women has peaked and declined, in fact declined quite significantly for women with young children, we've moved into a Martha Stewart kind of world where women have more time than money, and they're willing to make their own wrapping paper, for goodness sake. I mean, my generation generation of young women that were struggling careers, families, and everything else would never have dreamt of taking the time to do things like that.
Well, if the situation of boomer women, where they outnumbered the men who were going to marry them, if that led to feminism, as some would suggest, or at least contributed to it, is this going to reverse all the way?
Not all the way. The pendulum never swings fully back after these major shifts. I'm not suggesting we're going back to a Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie, and Harriet world where Dad is downtown working and Mom is always in the suburbs with the kids.
Honey, I'm home.
Yeah, the father knows best, I don't think, is ever going to be relevant again. But I do believe, and I think we're seeing it, that this has accompanied other factors, be it AIDS or other concerns that have led to a marked reduction in divorce rates, in promiscuity, and in our attitudes about so-called free love.
Now, did that situation with the extra numbers of women, did that ever present itself in situations in Muslim countries, and did it have a liberating effect there?
Well, I'd really have to think about that. There are countries, certainly, in the world where we have seen a rush of women into the labor force, similar to what happened in the boomer era in the United States. Singapore comes to mind. But there, the countries, there are some Muslim aspects to the population there. I'm not sure, though, that you can really link the two. There is no question, though, even in a country like Afghanistan prior to the Taliban, we did see an opening up of society and a dramatic surge of women professors, women doctors, many of whom left once the Taliban came in, but left to their own devices without the political constraints of the last 5 years. The population explosion, a rise in birth rates, does lead to this sort of, quote, liberation.
Now, you've speculated about this a moment ago. Do you think that you're going to see men going after women more or less their own age?
Well, certainly the age restrictions, whether they're societal or just factual, seem to be diminishing. And let's face it, I'm an economist. I believe in supply and demand in the marketplace. With the proliferation of fitness equipment and the fitness craze, I really do believe that the match between younger men, older women will grow in popularity by necessity, if for no other reason. And similarly, I think that we're going to see a broadening in the average age of first marriages. We've already seen a postponement of marriage just across the spectrum, whereas the average age of first marriages for men and women has risen over time. And that has to do as well with life expectancies. I mean, people's attitude toward age has changed markedly. Let's go to the phones. A quick caller. David joins us from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I had a question for the. I didn't know if your speaker might have some figures for which U.S. cities might be more favorable towards high ratios of single women to single men.
Sherry Cooper, do you have any information on that?
I don't have specific data because, unfortunately, the census data do not get into the age and marriage. They haven't published all the final figures on people's marriage status by age, by region. But what I can tell you is a famous example of a city or a region that's particularly bad for single guys in their 30s is Silicon Valley. Because, of course, in the technology world, the dot-com world, there were larger numbers of men than women to start with in terms of just the hiring pool, and that, in fact, there's, lots of guys around in their 30s and very few single women. A city that's been known to be very much the reverse is Washington, D.C., where, especially for single baby boomer-aged women, it was particularly negative.
Well, thanks, Sherry Cooper, very much. And David, I guess you'll have to take your chances there in Charlotte. Sherry Cooper, Executive Vice President and Global Economic Strategist for Harris Bank, author of Ride the Waves, Taking Control in a Turbulent Financial Age. I'm Neil Conan. This is Talk of the Nation from NPR News. This is Talk of the Nation. I'm Neil Conan in Washington. Conventional wisdom holds that the biological clock is ringing loudly for women of a certain age.
I'm gonna be 40!
When?
Someday.
In 8 years.
But it's there! It's just sitting there like this big dead end. And it's not the same for men. Charlie Chaplin had babies when he was 73.
Yeah, but he was too old to pick them up.
Since Harry met Sally, demographics have changed, and men may be hearing their biological alarm clocks. A shortage of women is upon us, at least from the perspective of men of a marrying age. How is that changing the rules? Give us a call at 800-989-TALK. That's 800-989-8255. Our email address is totn@npr.org. Joining us now is Jose de Lassa. He's co-owner of Social Circles, an activities service for professionals in New York City. He joins us from his office in Manhattan, and welcome.
Thank you, Neil. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. You're calling from New York, a city that's known to have more women than men. I wonder, have you noticed this shift that demographers are talking about?
Absolutely. Specifically in the last year, I would say we've had a 25% increase in the amount of men that have joined social circles. Yes, New York City does demographically have more women than men, and our membership over the past 4 years reflects a 55-45 ratio in favor of women. But I'd say over the last 18 months, we have had a significant increase in the amount of men that have joined the service. And particularly men, I would say between the ages of 35 and 44.
And do you notice that they're are they startled? Are they behaving differently?
Well, what they're doing is actually they're more active. The way our service is set up, it's an events company, and people go out and do different types of activities like wine tastings and movies and sporting events. And we're finding that the men in our service are becoming much more active than they were in the past. And whether that's a result of they're actually noticing that their choices are becoming more limited, I really can't say, but I can say that they are using the service much more frequently than the women are.
I guess I have to ask these days, do you see a difference since 9/11?
Well, we have seen a difference in a spike in the membership overall, both with men and women. People since 9/11 have wanted to come out of the woodwork and be connected with other people in a setting that's not in the workplace, and I think it's because people have prioritized things in a different way in their lives since 9/11, and they feel that making a connection with whether it be a group of people or with a significant other has sort of ratcheted up on the hierarchy of priorities, and we're certainly seeing that in the spike in membership for our company.
Well, joining us now on the phone is Bill, a caller from San Francisco, and Bill is in that. Are you in that age group that's getting a little bit more active, Bill?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm involved in everything from salsa dancing, downhill skiing, rock climbing, various social and professional outings. I mean, you have to be, because if you think that you can just be good looking and even just have a decent living and still be able to attract someone of your age, that being, in mid-30s and below, it's not going to work, at least not around here.
And it isn't working for you, in other words?
Well, actually, it wasn't for a long time. Then I made an adjustment in my strategy. I went out with someone who was in her early 40s, and we were in a really good relationship. It's very new, but, a lot of women my age are very standoffish. They don't want to be, they don't want to give the sense that they might stick around long term. And this is someone who clearly enjoys my company and who does want to stick around long term. And it's a nice, refreshing thing.
Jose de Lassa, is that your experience too? That men are now going out with women their age or older sometimes?
Oh, most definitely. I think men are realizing that the best way to meet a companion is to go out there and put themselves in situations where they're doing something active, whether it be going to movies or wine tastings or rock climbing, And I think that they're finding is that what's the best kind of companions are people that share their interests, and people that share their interests often are their contemporaries, people their same age. There's not such a gap in life experiences, and so they're looking for people who have the same kind of life experiences as they do, and so they're turning to people, women their age. And again, we're seeing that reflected in the type of activities that we're offering and the populations, the people that are populating the events themselves.
Bill, I wanted to ask you, did this situation surprise you? I mean, again, that whole media expectation, Sex in the City, Bridget Jones, all of that leads you to expect the opposite.
Oh, well, actually, it wasn't the current media that led me to expect the opposite. Though I enjoy Sex in the City, I kind of watch it, with a bit of pain because, I mean, these are 4 women who basically, pick and choose men and discard them, at their leisure. Same thing with Ally McBeal. But I grew up in the generation of the 70s, Penthouse Magazine and Playboy were really popular for my generation. And I thought that when I turned into my late teens and early 20s, the sexual revolution was going to be waiting and embracing me. And what I found was AIDS and herpes. And then, it horrified me when the cover of Newsweek had that microbiological photograph of the herpes virus, and it horrified a lot of people, and a lot of people just slowed down their promiscuity. And then with careers changing and women, kind of finding themselves and saying, I don't have to take any guy. And the numbers, what your statistics are showing, it's tougher now just to be a nice guy out there. I mean, I think bad boys still do have the edge, but I would say in general, women, if they don't want to put up with it, they can date somebody older, somebody younger. They can do whatever they want. A lot of them are even waiting longer before they do settle into a relationship, and guys try really, really hard, but they are in the catbird position right now.
Huh. Well, good luck to you, Bill, and good luck in this new relationship.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Bill on the line with us from San Francisco, and Jose de Lassa, thanks very much for speaking with us.
You're most welcome.
Jose de Lassa is the co-owner of Social Circles, an activity service for professionals in New York City. He joined us from his office in Manhattan. Another way some people find each other these days is on the net. Match.com is one of the largest online dating services with 2.4 million members. Cindy Hennessy is the chief matching officer of Match.com, and she joins us from her offices in Dallas, Texas. And welcome.
Thank you, Neil.
Personal ads, online services tend to have more men than women participants in general. Are you seeing any changes in that regard?
Well, we aren't seeing dramatic changes, but I will tell you that measuring over the last year, we're finding that men who have a preponderance to date women younger have reduced not only the number of years younger they're willing to date, going from 10 years to 8 years younger now.
And they would list this in their ad, right?
Yes.
So that's how you know this for sure.
Yes, so we know statistically by everyone on the site exactly what's going on. What's more interesting is men are now willing to date 1 year older than they were just a year ago. Women have also shifted 1 year older, so we are seeing a constricted sort of dating age that men now desire versus before.
Now, yours is an odd statistical services because you lose track of your successes. Presumably, as soon as they hook up with somebody, they don't subscribe to Match.com anymore.
That's right, and we think that's a good statistic. We think churn is good. So as people come in and out of the service, success begets more success because they tell friends and family about, how magical the online dating experience can be on Match. One of the other things I'd like to comment about that was made earlier is not only are people postponing the age that they're willing to marry, but women, particularly in the 30-something age range, tend to be very career-focused. So men looking to date women in the 30-something age group find that there may be a dearth for a time, but as women begin to reflect in their late 30s and early 40s on balance in their life, they're much more active and begin to change their strategy as well.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the phones. It's 800-989-8255, or send us an email, totn@npr.org. John joins us on the line from Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
I'm a 35-year-old professional who I'm actually part of a pool of young professionals who seem to have difficulty finding women who behave the way women used to behave. They now seem to behave more. They've adopted some of the really bad habits that men have always had over the centuries, namely wanting to date many men at the same time, being commitment phobic, and actually breaking up with you if you don't sleep with them within a relatively short amount of time. If you actually spend time delving into their thoughts and opinions and actually exploring their brains, they seem to get a little offended that you aren't paying more attention to their physical selves. And my cohorts and I are kind of perplexed by this and wondering, where are all of the good women? Where have they gone?
John, I do have to say that men being perplexed is a permanent condition and has nothing to do with the ratio of available women. But Cindy, what about his other observations?
Well, I think that, part of that is a myth. It's the type of people you may be meeting. And one recommendation I would have after looking at Match.com and the site is if you're not living in the South, maybe you want to go there, because clearly cities in the South have greater populations of women certainly active online than those cities in the North, with New York being the exception to the rule. So where do you live?
He says Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Well, there are a ton of women there, so something's going wrong. I'd try to change your activities and see if you can't do something there. Go on Match.com where you can select women based on what they say they're looking for, and the essays tell you a lot about how willing they are to be more open or more traditional in their dating patterns.
Well, I think that's probably one of the things that's so perplexing, because I think that there's a definite disconnect between what a percentage, I won't say all, because that you don't want to throw a blanket over an entire gender, but what women say they want and then what they actually do with, when they finally get what it is they say they want, they don't know what to do with it. And the example would be, women will always say, I want a man who will listen, who will empathize and sympathize, someone who's going to take the time to get to know me and my interests, etc. And when they finally meet someone who is not stereotypical, who's not trying to sleep with them on the first or second or even fifth date, they don't know what to do with him, and they wind up telling their girlfriends, well, I don't think he's interested in me. When you are doing everything that a woman could possibly want, except trying to jump in bed with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cindy, Match.com is one of the world's great repositories of what women say they want. They say they want it in your ads.
Absolutely.
And what do they say they want?
Well, I think they say they want all the things that all human beings want. They're looking for love. They're looking for all the things that the caller mentions. Good listeners, people that are active, people that tend to be, more fit than not, people that, reside closer to them than not. But I think psychologically what women really want is someone that really shares their interests and activities and is willing to, share a life with them. So I'm surprised to hear the caller say that once they find this woman that they seem to have rapport with over, the course of 5 dates, that suddenly they land in this mine of, don't know what to do, got everything I want, now what? And it may be age specific. Are you dating 20-something women?
I've actually, as an example, when I was 27, I dated someone who was 22. 5 years is an average, difference. And when we broke up, the next person was 42. And I found that emotionally, one was about as unstable as the other. And in fact, the 42-year-old seemed to behave more of as an adolescent than the 22-year-old in terms of her some of the choices that she made. So usually what I find is that women seem to have two distinct personalities residing in them. One is the falling in love personality, and there's the post-falling in love personality. And the pre-falling in love personality, if there's any tiny little thing that they don't like as a reason to nix the dating process, once they fall in love, the man can cheat on her, he can embarrass her in public, he can do all sorts of really disgusting things, but she won't leave. She'll get the Oprah circle together on Friday night with her girlfriend, light candles, break out the box of tissue and the red wine, and complain about how bad men are. But the nice guy, the engineer, the CPA, the stable guy who's not Johnny Dangerous riding the Harley, that's the guy that she says she doesn't want, but that's the one she always winds up dating. I think that speaks more to emotional maturity, which I don't think is age specific. I think it's something that some women are ready for what they say they want and can deal with it when they get it, when they're presented with it. Sort of like if a 9-year-old child says, Daddy, I want to drive the car. Well, you don't let a 9-year-old drive a car. He isn't prepared to drive a car. So even if you gave him the keys, he wouldn't know what to do with it once he had it. And I think a lot of women need to, match what they say they want with their behavior. And I think that.
And John, maybe a few more sit-ups too.
Yeah.
Hey, I have.
Thanks for the call, John. We really want to move on to somebody else. We appreciate it. You are listening to Talk of the Nation from NPR News. And now let's go to Janice, who's on the line from Akron, Ohio.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that I'm 47, and I just recently married for the first time. And
congratulations.
Been more stunned than me. And I'm very happily married to, he's George. He's 2 years younger than I am. But he's divorced, and when he divorced, his friends all said, "Oh, good, now you can go out with all the sweet young babes," and he said he didn't want the sweet young babe. He wanted somebody with emotional maturity and somebody he could relate to.
And he settled for you.
And we're extremely happy.
Congratulations, Janice.
Thank you.
Now, when
and I beat the odds. I didn't get hit by a truck.
And you didn't get hit by a truck or a bolt
terrorist bullet.
Yeah,
right.
Bolt of lightning. But when you were, 42, 43, 44, had you sort of begun wondering by that point?
Well, I used to think, I guess I was always pretty stubborn. I used to think when I was in my 20s that, well, if I don't get married by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have children and raise them myself. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I ended up with my cats and dogs and decided that, things were, I just liked myself and I liked doing what I do, and I was, pretty independent. And suddenly my husband dropped in on my doorstep one day and said he had admired me from afar and wanted to date me, and it was just wonderful.
Now, it sounds like you should be writing the movies from now on.
Right. So, but I did wonder for a while, but then I was really happy with just being me. I thought, it's not going to happen, and that's okay. I had become way okay with it.
And ultimately, being you was what worked.
Yes, being me.
And you're not alone. The average age of subscribers for women on Match.com is 41. So there are a lot of 40-something women out there looking for their match. And I think the beauty is that you have gone through several life stages, so you're much more focused on what it is you now need and want versus just, what the standard package might have been 10 years before or 20 years before.
We're much more realistic, both of us.
Janice, thanks very much for the call, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
And Cindy Hennessy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Neil.
She is Chief Matching Officer of Match.com and joined us from her office in Dallas, Texas. I'm Neil Conan. This is Talk of the Nation, coming to you from NPR News. This is Talk of the Nation. I'm Neil Conan in Washington. We want to hear from you with criticism, critiques, and kudos for something you may have heard on Talk of the Nation. Our address, TOTN@NPR.org. Please type letters in the subject line, or if you have a follow-up question for one of our guests, send us an email with that question and a daytime phone number where we can reach you. Same email address, TOTN@NPR.org. Please type follow-up in the subject line. And please, whenever you write us, include your hometown and a tip on how to pronounce your name. We read from your letters and occasionally take a follow-up question every Thursday on Talk of the Nation. Tomorrow we'll be talking about terrorism, Al-Qaeda, and what drives Osama bin Laden. Our guest is author Peter Bergen, one of the few Western journalists who've interviewed Osama. Today we're talking about the dating scene in light of the looming shortage of women. Is it getting better or worse for you? What's the worst date you have ever been on? Give us a telephone call at 800-989-TALK. Our email address, TOTN@NPR.org. And joining us now is David Borgenicht. I'm sorry I mispronounced that. He's the co-author of The Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook, Dating and Sex, the third book in the Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook series. The author's talked with experts from dating consultants to FBI agents, restaurateurs to find out the best ways to survive a date. David joins us now from member station WHYY in Philadelphia, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I assume you're writing from experience.
Alas, I am, yes. I think anybody who's been through the dating scene has plenty of war stories.
What's your favorite war story that you can recount on the radio?
Well, thankfully it's been a while. I've been married for 6 years, so it's I haven't dated recently. My wife will be happy to know, but probably the worst one was a night where I ended up meeting a woman in a bar. Always a bad start, and later on found myself heading up to New York to a party, and then still later that night stranded in Hoboken. It didn't get much prettier from there on.
I could see how that might stick in your memory, yeah. What are some of the scenarios that you write about?
Well, it's really everything from fending off a pickup artist to identifying an axe murderer, how to identify the potential the gender of your potential date in the bar, what to do if you wake up the next day and you can't remember their name, curing bad breath, body odor, pimples, as well as just the old how to escape from a bad date in general.
Well, in writing this book and doing research that presumably involved more than your own personal nightmares, have you noticed this demographic shift that we've been talking about?
Well, we didn't take too much note of that. I mean, I think we really wanted to write a book that applied to both sexes.
Mm-hmm.
So the first two books were written by me and Josh Piven, and we've added Jennifer Warwick as our third author for the female perspective. So it's whether or not there's a shortage of women, it's always been tough for people who are looking for love, and either way, whichever gender you are, it's a worst case scenario out there.
Okay, well, let's go back to the phones. Our telephone number is 800-989-8255. That's 800-989-TALK. And go to somebody also calling from Philadelphia. This is Meredith, who's joined us on the line from Philadelphia.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Hi, I'm a bartender, and a long time ago I made an observation. I was always wondering where all these single guys who had tons of women to pick from, because as a bartender I am constantly listening to guys talk about that they can't find any nice women, and most of the men that I talk to are usually in their mid to early 30s.
And you're sure they're not giving you a sob story here?
No, they're not. Well, they are giving me a sob story, but honestly, I see that there's women really do have their pick of the lot. And in Philadelphia, there's the Philadelphia Sport and Social Club, and all these people are joining all of these groups to meet other people, and it's usually the guys who are doing it. It's usually 70% men and 30% women.
And this makes for an uncomfortable scene, does it not?
It makes for a very uncomfortable scene for everybody, because the women normally have these men circling around them, and the guys really, they feel pretty put out, and also I think they feel like they're competing with everybody else.
And David, this is a situation that could certainly lead to a few nightmare scenarios.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of aggressive people to fend off out there, and in the book we do deal with some of the best ways to fend off those situations. The old if you're in the bar and somebody's trying to pick you up, the old elbow knock technique, where you sort of accidentally, in quotation marks, hit the drink and spill it into their lap, is a good way to cure them of their amorous intentions.
We all call it the circling of the sharks.
That's right.
And occasionally, I guess there's blood in the water, or is there blood in the water at your bar every night?
No, we have a pretty low-key crowd. It's a pretty nice crowd, but I guess I feel bad for these guys. They're mostly young professional guys, and as a woman, I know that I can pretty much date 5 years younger. As a 30-year-old, I could date someone 5 years younger or up into their mid-40s, and I just feel like the guys have kind of they've keyholed themselves into only wanting to date someone who's like 5 years younger than them.
And you're looking at these guys objectively. I mean, you think that normal situation, these guys who are moaning to you might actually get a date?
Oh yeah, they do. Absolutely, they do. That's not their motivation. I'm sure.
But they're not losers.
No, not at all. Nice guys, great jobs. Just, I think that they're just, for some reason, there just doesn't seem to be enough young women out there for them.
Huh. Well, thanks, Meredith, very much.
Thank you.
And good luck to you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Now let's go to Chris, who joins us on the line from Fairfax, Virginia.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to the dating scene for me, I was actually very fortunate. I never had problems getting dates.
And why was that?
Well, I think it's because the way I approached it. I mean, you can approach dating as this terrible, scary thing, or you can just kind of relax about it. My definition of a date probably helped. To me, a date is a pretext to meet somebody at a predetermined time and place.
Well, the dictionary would agree with you.
So, I never had any of this pressure. Oh, well, what sort of romantic things?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only problem with my approach was that because I was so casual about it, none of the girls really thought it was a date.
I see.
Maybe it wasn't a date. Maybe you were out doing errands or something.
Well, it turned out that I went through a period of about a year and a half. All the girls I ended up going out on 2-3 dates with either had boyfriends, husbands, or fiancés.
And again, isn't that, David, that typically that turns around the other way?
Well, sure, and there are some things you can look for. If the person that you're hoping to date uses the we pronoun instead of I often, if they talk about a roommate or a personal friend a lot, and obviously if they have the telltale white tan line around their ring finger, these are probably women to stay away from.
Well, again, I got to the point where I was very, I like these women, and it was never, a sexual or anything type of date. It was, I'll meet you here, we have this common interest, let's go do this. But after about a year, I kind of broke down, and first off the bat, I asked, are you seeing anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Starting off, and boy, my luck changed then.
I see. Well, if you get picky that way, David, that's an obvious situation that can turn into a nightmare. Is that the most common one that you found, at least writing this book?
Running into somebody who's previously attached, you mean?
Or even currently attached.
Or currently attached, right? Well, it's one of the more common. I mean, I think from the men's side, it actually, at least the impression tends to be that it's women who want to move things too fast. But there are some ways to let them know what you want very clearly without buying into the fact that you need to be in a long-term relationship, after the first date either.
Well, Chris, good luck to you.
Well, actually, my story has a happy ending. I gave up completely on dating, and the very next day I found the woman who I married.
Well, then congratulations.
But you didn't marry her the next day after that, did you?
No, it took me about a month.
Okay, Chris. So long.
Thank you. Bye.
You're listening to Talk of the Nation from NPR News. And let's go back and get Eugene, who joins us now from Bremerton, Washington.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for putting me on. I'm afraid that between myself and the last caller, we're going to give a slant to this that you'll need to stay on for a while to get some other people on so that we can get a counter view. But I met my wife 9 years ago sitting in a pub. So being in a bar is not a bad start.
So were you one of those sharks circling in the water there?
No, I was sitting there reading the paper. And this woman sat down beside me, and at first, you just kind of give a glance over and then pretty much ignore each other. And then somebody mentioned something, and a conversation starts, and next thing I knew, a bell jar had come down over the two of us, and...
the cone of silence, yeah.
We've never been apart since.
Well, that's a great story, Eugene.
Del, yeah. It's, I guess the thing is to stop. If you stop looking, when kind of a Zen thing, when you stop striving, it comes.
That's right. The watch pot never boils. It's the same sort of thing in the bar.
Granted.
Okay, Eugene. Good luck with your marriage.
Thank you very much. I've had all I need, really.
Good.
Anyway, thank you.
Bye-bye. And let's see if we get one last caller in, and that it would be Gary, who's on the line with us from Boston.
Thank you very much for taking the call.
Sure.
I think it's time we inject the N word into this conversation, the nice guy word into this conversation. I am the proverbial nice guy, and all of my friends were, let's use the word cads, and they're late 30-something-year-old men that had absolutely no trouble in finding and attracting late 20-something-year-old women. All the bad stereotypes about, extravagant income and spending, and they just seem to have no trouble in attracting late 20-something-year-old women, and the worse they treated them, the more they were rewarded for that behavior. And I'm fortunate I've been married for the last 6 months, but I was the person in the crowd. They all went, "You're such a nice guy. Why are you hanging out with them?" And it was simple. I was surrounded by beautiful women who was easy to, kind of be with these guys. But it's definitely something where, women do not always reward nice behavior. And by reward, I mean it in the crass sense.
I believe it was Leo DeRocher who put that in a capsule, nice guys finish last.
And I mean, you're talking about someone who, for 9 years, my whole 30s, I witnessed it firsthand, and the nicer I was, the more distant it seemed I got. Luckily, I finally found the right person who would reward me for being a nice person, and I'm quite happy and thrilled to be married. Met her in a bar at a singles dance on Christmas Eve, but, again, it seemed like a long, hard slog to find someone who would reward me for being who I was. And I think a lot of your single male listeners in particular will identify with that, people telling you to play a game is an awfully hard thing, and yet it seems to be what's rewarded.
Well, it's often, I think, a question of motivation. I mean, the guys who are the more aggressive and the cads, as you will, are just going for what they want probably harder than the nice guys are, and they probably tend to get it because they're asking more.
Mike, and I have lots of female friends who would freely admit to me that they feel that way, that the kind of bad boy image gets rewarded. And I'm not talking all the time about sexually, just, in general, paying attention, going out on dates, those types of things. And until someone, male or female, is ready to, look beyond flash and look for substance, I mean, that's what's going to happen. And I certainly have long since he's trying to change the world. It's just, you'd find no more empathetic audience than me to the idea that, being true to yourself ought to be rewarded, but often isn't.
Well, we've had a couple of examples, not just yourself, of people who called and seem to have found happiness despite their obvious failings of being nice.
I thank you, and I'd encourage anyone listening to just be true to yourself, keep your eyes open, and look in unlikely spots, because chances are that people that are worth meeting aren't in a bar somewhere. You've met them already. You just passed them by.
Okay, David, thanks very much for the call.
Thank you, guys.
And David Borgenicht, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
David Borgenicht is co-author of the Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook, Dating and Sex. It's the third book in the Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook series. He joined us from member station WXPN in Philadelphia. In Washington, I'm Neil Conan, NPR News.